Good evening and welcome to the February 4th, 2019 meeting of the Merrimack School Board. Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Item number 2 is public participation. Anyone that would like to speak under public participation, please come to the microphone. State your name and address for the record. Seeing none, I will close public participation. And we're on to item number 3, which is the presentation of the proposed plan to reconstruct the parking lot area off School Street at the Mastrocola Complex. So I invite to the table Steve Keach from Keach Nordstrom, and I will turn the mic over to Matt Chevenel to introduce the project.
Okay, thank you. This is a project that's been on the capital improvement plan for a number of years right now, and it is a warrant article going to be on the ballot as approved by the school board, and it basically is to look at some redesign and reconfiguration of the parking lot in front of Mastrocola Elementary School and the parking lot in front of J. Muse, the upper elementary school, just adjacent to School Street, that little patch in front of the little patch of road in front of the school and the church parking lot. What some of the things we wanted to accomplish is take care of the issue of drainage, because that has a tendency to pool up. There's several cracks in the lot. The lot is not very even as far as the surface goes. And the entrances to the Smith Gym, Mastrocola Elementary School are not really, they're a little short of being ADA compliant right now. So Steve, myself, Tom Tussaud, Paul Chisholm have met a few times out there to take a look at the parking lot and kind of the things we'd like to address, and a lot of suggestions that they have. They're very helpful. We actually had, seeing the majority of the bulk of the project is Mastrocola Elementary School, we invited Michelle Romaine, the principal, out to meet with us on a rainy day, standing out there, kind of looking at everything and getting some of her input and her knowledge of how the traffic flows and what the issues are, and what she would like to see too. So we've got some inputs, and Steve and Paul Chisholm put them down on paper, and we have a graphic presentation that we'll give it to you tonight. You have copies in your packet, and then after that we'll post them online for everybody to take a look as of tomorrow. So Steve?
Very good. As Matt indicated, he and I first looked at this with Tom Tussaud a number of years ago. I forget the number, but it was a crooked one. Basically, the trouble that has plagued that area, the parking lot, sort of in front of Smith Gym and at the entrance to the elementary school, is poor grading. By poor grading, I mean the shape of the paved surface is incorrect. It actually drains, as you know, towards the building instead of away from it. There's a single catch basin that doesn't work particularly well. We, based on our survey, we found that it has a small diameter, 6 or 8 inch pipe that discharges to the town system. It was constructed of corrugated metal pipe, and at the age that pipe would be today, I suspect that if we cambered it, we would find that it's rotten. So it wouldn't be big enough to begin with by any stretch of the imagination for today's design standards, but being that it is aged and is probably filled in with sediment, possibly rotten, is probably the reason that we have the ponding, that more so now than you experienced in prior years. There's also the issue of lack of ADA compliance in the concrete apron in front of the Smith Gym. Obviously, when that building was done, the Americans with Disabilities Act simply didn't exist. So while we're in the neighborhood, we will remedy that. Lastly, in terms of issues that while we're there, when we met with Michelle, was the principal, we asked a couple of questions. The area is underparked for her needs. And I made an off-the-cuff comment to those who were with us that day that, you know, if we turned the parking 90 degrees, we could improve circulation and add more parking without a dramatic increase in the paved surface. So we've done that, and I'll go into the details. But those were our challenges. Predominantly, the project started off as, you know, more drainage driven when we first looked at it, that crooked number of years ago. And now it's, so I'm going to move this over since there's nobody sitting there and I don't have a portable microphone. So in terms of a layout, what we've come up with is the limits of work would basically be this area in here. We would rework the paved surface, and instead of having the parking interlocks. Oh, thank you, sir. All right. I guess I screwed that up. Instead of having the interlocks go this way, we're going to turn them 90 degrees. That enables one-way circulation that goes with the sped buses that use this area and maximize safety, and for the discharging of student passengers, either here or here on the right side of the vehicle. Everybody comes around back this way. This one interlock here would be available for two-way traffic based on the motorist's need. By doing this, we increase the number of line spaces within the parking lot from 38 to 61. The other thing that we're doing while we're in the neighborhood is one thing that this entrance to the elementary school lacks is prominence. If you didn't know where you were going, you would never find it. Areas, you know, the canopy is beyond the corner of the building. Obviously, we can't change the configuration of the building, but we can change the appearance of the prominence of the area. In order to do that, since we're going to rip out all the pavement that is there, we're going to use different material selection in here, all at grade so a vehicle can continue to go through. We'll place sunken curb at the limits of pavement, and this area that you see that's relatively square that has this active little graphic pattern will be pavers. So it will be not only a color difference, but a textural difference. And then in order to comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act, where the 4 ADA spaces will be preserved that are there today, will be preserved here. We'll do a walk with the appropriate rampage that takes pedestrians from that and discharges them onto the pavers. But behind it in this monument area, we'll do a brick area. So all of a sudden we've gone from everything being black pavement to some brick in the monument area, if you will. Concrete pavers that will be a color that Matt and Tom will select in here, and it's all different textures. So the identity of this area will be highlighted as being different from else. Our plans don't call for, at this point, landscaping or other vertical elements that could be added at a later time to further give the area prominence. I'm trying to take the first timer and trying to create a gate to something that can't be seen is the attempt. In terms of drainage, we'll back. Matt indicated some reworking of the parking area over here at the entrance to the upper elementary school where the double doors that take you to the APR are. That same paver pattern will be there to differentiate that from the pavement. So motorists won't be tempted to park on it, or, that they'll make a recognition that it's something that isn't a paved parking lot. And that'll dress that area up a little bit. Give us an opportunity to regrade it for better drainage. And make it look better. In terms of drainage, as I indicated, I'm going to go back to the existing conditions plan actually first. The paved surface here, that's here today, generally drains to a low point. That is right off the corner of where the joint of Smith Gym and the elementary school kind of come together. It's approximately foot and a half deeper than everything around it. It's a sump. Water goes into a catch basin and is pumped through a pipe through a 6-inch line to the town system down at school in Bishop. In my mind, that's graded backwards. I generally like to have sites drain away from buildings and pedestrians. So we're reversing the grade of this, and this is one of the things that's enabling us to bring the entrance to the gym into compliance with the ADA. There's such a slope there to get down to that existing low point. If we flatten that area, therefore we necessarily bring this elevation where the low point is today up considerably. That allows us to maintain a positive slope away from the building going diagonally across the parking lot, this corner over here. At that location, there'll be a cluster of catch basins that will receive that water. Obviously, we can't overtax the town system here, so we designed it kind of, I analyzed it backwards. What is the capacity of the pipe that we're going to? Not what is the capacity need to be. So Paul has designed this small infiltration / detention system. Rainfalls, minor rainfall events, day-to-day rainfall events, there will be no discharge from that. Because of the great soils that we've got up there with the sand, all of the water will, accumulated storm water will infiltrate into the underlying soil mass, aquifer. And more significant events that the permeability of the soil can't take all of the water that's coming in at one time. That will serve as these underground chambers will create volume that will detain the storm water, and then it will slowly meter out into the system. So it's functioning both for disposal and for detention in greater storm events, so as not to overtax the municipal system on School and Bishop Street. Quite simple, actually. And most of this other drainage in here would just be, except for the structure, which we would remove, would just be abandoned in place. Some of it is would be preserved because we think there may be roof drains and other ancillary things that connect to it. Very small volumes, but make provision to tie that back in. Because truth of the matter is we're probably never really going to know what might connect into that somehow. Some minor little something or other that's accumulated over the years. So that's it. In terms of budget, we're anticipating that come bid day that the cost of the work could approach $325,000, which is a number that I think you've heard before. Any questions, Madam Chairman?
There might be. I see Andy so far.
So the only question I had, this is really good. Having lived in that circle, dropping off for years, it's a good time to be able to do this. So one of the things I don't remember is, and I guess this is more of a question for you, is the flow through that parking lot. Do the buses go through there at all, or do they just stay on Bishop and School Street?
They stay on Bishop and School Street. School Street, then they take a left onto Bishop, and then they come back around. MES's as you know, is in the back.
In the back, right?
But there are some special needs vans that do use that area. And then,
Right.
then there's some parent drop-offs
So,
going
so
on.
my question was, I mean, the flow looks better, especially with big arrows and do not enter sign, you know. People have complained about, at all schools complain that the flow isn't always followed. This will help to improve that, I believe. But I just want to make sure that in the optimization for spaces that we're not prohibiting a vehicle that might normally use that from having egress to be able to get around it. I mean, for example, with some of the buses that use it, like the smaller, the yellow school buses that are shorter, and are they small enough to be able to make the corners around that new path? That was my only question.
I can answer that.
Yeah, Steve can answer that.
We have this counterclockwise circulation pattern. Matt and Tom tell us that this is the area where buses could be.
Mhm.
This is why we left this aisle here, is for two-way traffic. So if there's a bus here that is blocking this route, person can come in here and either come back around, or there's enough width in here for that person to go by without interrupting it. In the existing conditions, there's opportunities there because of this for short circuiting, which I don't like in this environment because of the fact that if there's no cars parked there, then vehicle can make its own path and sort of randomly appear. And from being a parent at one point in time, that I saw plenty of that in the mornings from time to time with the various schools with my own children. So I think what we've got, perhaps at the risk of a little inconvenience at times, is a much safer situation too.
Right, well, I mean, it's obvious that the current one is almost like a triangle in terms, and there's this big gap that's not used. When you look at it, it's obvious that you're taking the lower section that's closer to the houses and going much closer to the lines.
We are.
And squaring off the lot so you can use it more optimally to do that. And again, my only question was, is the buses, when the buses themselves, after they've picked up at Smith Gym, when they go to leave, do they have enough angle and egress with
They
cars
do.
in those lots to get in and out?
That's one of the two reasons that we have end cap islands here. We have them for other reasons, is to protect the light fixtures. But over here, we have none, so that your effective width is greater than your actual width, because this is nothing but paint, Andy.
Assuming that nobody double parks in the spot, you're all set.
Well, going from 38 to 61 spaces, right?
If you build it, they will come.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Excellent.
And I
Are there-
think if
I hope that helps.
And if I could add a little bit, you know, one of the things that we were talking about when we were there in meeting is in the evening how, you know, coming out of the APR for budget committee meetings and whatnot, sometimes we have to meet there too. It's dark in that parking lot, Master Cola Elementary School. It really is. And so we were talking about in these islands adding some lights. So
The
that
LED fixtures.
LED fixtures, yeah. To
Right now, you're
brighten it up.
lighting that area indirectly by building mounted packs that are not only inefficient in terms of electrical consumption, but they also create dark spots. You're on the opposite side of that vehicle, you're not going to have light because you're trying to light off this corner of the building towards that direction. By putting pole-mounted LED fixtures there, it'll be a nice clean light, incredibly efficient in
Now-
terms of the electrical consumption.
Just a quick follow-up question. So when you put the lights there, well, first, when you expand the lot closer to the houses, do we have to take trees down to be able to do that?
Some brush, but not trees,
Okay.
maybe one or two.
Right. I'm just worried about if we insert lights where there aren't lights, if the people that abut it will have issues with extra light going in and stuff.
I actually did this project here for Peter Flood many years ago, and when we did that, if you recall, there's an area of fencing in there and landscaping that's matured. I don't think they'll have a problem. And then this dwelling here, is actually orientated facing Bishop Street. So, I mean, there's gonna be some vegetation removal. I don't know if I would go to far as to call it trees.
Sounds like my cousin Vinny. Those things with bushes.
Oh, yeah, the tings.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Thanks.
Naomi?
I realize this is a slightly different issue, and you mentioned it in tangent, but is there any landscaping we should be taking into account while we do this? Is there anything we're leaving undone, so to speak, by putting that aside?
I don't envision there being any opportunities to do landscaping in here. In fact, that was somewhat by design at the request of Tom, because anything that you've got to maintain. This area over here is different. There's an area that's landscaped in there today that has a monument sign that's of a memorial nature. Matt could explain that better than I. Its purpose, and it was a special project, and you know, to the extent that it might have to be touched, I think the materials can be moved. There also could be opportunities behind this, Naomi, to do something similar, purpose-driven, that is not necessarily a standard landscape package that you would see. You know, I think that opportunity will come. I'm just not certain it needs to be part or wants to be part of this project. I think this sets the foreground for it.
Yeah, I think, I agree. Plus, we had talked about possibility for snow storage too, in that particular area.
Tom has asked us to keep this area.
Yeah. Yeah, one in the front near the exercise yard, as Dan Heinrich likes to call it, and then one in the back near MES, yeah.
Does that help, Naomi?
Brandy?
I'm sure that this has already been discussed probably at length, but when we have voting in this area, it gets very congested with obviously the design that is currently in place. Where I guess maybe it's just the way I'm looking at this. When we have voting, does that change the traffic pattern that we have going through? Because there's just so many people that line right there, and having the cars go through, has that been? I'm assuming that can be sort of figured out after the fact, after it's all done. But
when we have voting, it's at the upper elementary school,
Right.
which is not part of this parking lot. And normally we ask the teachers to park at is it the Legion, Steve? Mm-hmm. Yeah, park at the Legion. So that whole church parking lot is open for voters. So they park in the church parking lot, then they walk directly into Mastercola Upper Elementary School.
for drop off, it gets really congested at that.
Right, okay.
That's what I'm talking about. I'm not necessarily talking about non drop off times or pickup times, but in that time frame, it gets just very congested.
Yeah, the
So I didn't
congestion
know.
tends to happen down through here,
Yeah,
in part because we often have candidates polling, greeting voters as they're on the way in. They tend to set up right in here.
Right, and then they go. So people, well, just the way it is now, I think it's probably sort of what they've done rather than what they're supposed to do. So we typically will find that we park in there, or we have different traffic routes. So I didn't know if
Well, we typically, because I've also been a assistant moderator for 20-something years, and I've worked many elections there. I don't anymore. I'm out at the
Middle school's
school?
me, yep.
Yeah, thank you, Shannon. But what Lynn normally has had is those barricades in here, keep that area off limits, in part for election law reasons, because a voter should be able to walk in to vote without being harassed by a candidate or somebody who wants to talk to them about how they ought to vote. She's also typically, we've had people who work here during the elections will park here on the lawn, if you will, from time to time. But she typically tells the people who are there working for the day not to park over here, to keep it available for school and the staff. because we have the so-called church parking lot that goes down here. Now, congestion during rush hour, school out, it'll happen, and I don't think there's not much we can do about that. Most of our limits of work are beyond.
Okay, are there any other questions? Mine is how long? This is looks like an extensive process of bringing up, laying down underground, and
Pick things up and put them down.
yes. So with that, I know that we try to do as much as we can that's not student impacting. So what's the timeline of this, looking at July 1st is when the,
I'm thinking that, obviously, based on available funding, I think it's Matt's intent to have a contractor selected so that contractor can be mobilized late June, 1st of July, similar to when we did the retaining wall at the track a couple of years ago, and be concluded by the time, or substantially complete by the time the teachers come back a week or two before school opens up to do what they need to do. I would envision a capable contractor should be able to do this job from start to finish in 4 to 6 weeks.
okay.
Yeah, our date in in any contract we do will probably be mid-August for completion date.
I would envision, that when town meeting comes and goes, if funds are appropriated for this, that Matt will have us have this bid by May 1st?
Yes, absolutely.
Something like that?
Yeah.
And then you would be receiving bids sometime around Memorial Day?
Mm-hmm.
Something like that. So that would give time to receive the bids, Matt to do what he needs to, bring them to where he needs to take them, and get somebody under contract with a couple of weeks so they can start ordering what they need, materials, so forth, to do the job. Couple of jobs that I have helped Matt and Tom with over the years. The contractors that when we solicit contractors, we let them know the time frames. And, there's been times when certain contractors can't fit that into the schedule, so they don't bid. But they know.
Okay. So, are there any other questions for Steve? Well, the one thing I think that we didn't talk about with the presentation is the monies, and you came in spot on. So
I think that happened by accident.
okay, I think you're about within $1,000 under budget. So that's perfect. But the thing is, it's extensive. I think it's more than I even envisioned this project to be. So
One thing that when we put this out, we're going to do it on a unit price basis. So instead of being a lump sum, the contractor will be paid X dollars per cubic yard of gravel, per foot of pipe, that type of stuff. So when it gets bid day, if there's any surprises, we know where we can manipulate the scope and still be able to do the project. I think the 325 is probably a little generous,
okay,
but last year we saw stuff that I put out to bid for municipalities where I serve as town engineer. We saw about a 7 to 8% escalation in construction prices because of labor costs. None of the people in these businesses that do this type of work can hire people at any price. So it becomes a situation where they're paying a lot more for labor because they're having people that might be a notch above that level of worker doing the lowest level, because kids don't want to work for $15, $16 an hour. They're breaking their back. Too many video games or something, right? But there was about a 7 or 8% across the board increase in construction costs last year. So it was, Paul did his estimate based on live bid results for 2018.
Okay.
I'd like to go into this with a minimum of about $10,000 of contingencies. Because when you take up pavement and you're dealing with utilities that you might find that you don't know that are there, those can, contractor find something that they don't plan on being there, they got to be paid to deal with it. So I'd like to go into this project with a little bit of contingency money there too. I'd love to see the bids come back at 310, something like that.
Excellent. That's good news.
All right?
Are there any other questions from the board? Any other comments from the gallery? No, we're good. So make sure. Thank you.
Have a good night.
You as well. I'm really excited about the additional parking. That's great news. And lighting. Excellent. So we are on to item number 4, which is consideration of the modification to the approved capital improvement plan given changes to the 2019-2020 budget. So I'll turn it over to Margie Matt.
Thank you. So the reason that we're putting this before you tonight is because you might recall that you approved the capital improvement plan from 2019 to 2025 on December 3rd, 2018. And since that time, we've gone through the budget process, and there have been some modifications that have been made to intended projects, like roofing at the Mastrocola complex. And because we are scheduled to go before the planning board on February 19th, we thought that it might be prudent to come back and ask if you wish to change the capital improvement plan to match what is going on relative to the budget for next year, so that when the presentation is made to the planning board, it will be in sync. And that hasn't happened before. So we just wanted to put it before you, and so I'm describing what is the prompt. It is going before the planning board, and then I've asked Matt to just highlight the changes that we would put before you.
Yeah, thank you. As you recall, the board had some modifications to the proposed 2019-2020 budget, one of which was the removal of the roof project at Mastrocola Elementary School and Mastrocola Elementary School. Was a reduction of $655,805. In speaking with Tom, we thought that we could put that from 1920 into 2021 and then shift everything out a year, because we've been fairly let's see, I can't think of the word right now. We've been fairly compliant with our roof replacement program, and we've been dedicated to it over the years. So it appears that can happen, so that everything can just shift one block to the right. So the 655 would go in 2021, and then everything would go to the right off there till 24-25. And then the other one is the turf field upgrade, or the installation of the turf. We have a better budget number to work with, and that is $1.2 million as opposed to $1 million, seeing it's a new installation, and it may or may not happen depending upon the status of the petition warrant article in 2019-2020. That number has been verified as a good budget number from the engineers that I was requested to hire to do the bid specifications on the track. They're currently working with another school district. They're a very good firm. They're called Ty and Bond. Brad Mesquita is the principal engineer and the vice president of the firm, and he is handling the design, the bid specifications, everything for us. So if the warrant article does come forward, we'd be ready in the spring to go out to bid and get this done. So that is a good budget number to go forward with.
Andy and Cinda.
So at our last meeting, when we made the decision to delay the entire roofing project out of this year, which I wasn't supportive, but that's cool. The board as a whole was. It's cool. I thought that the approach was going to be that we were going to do both projects in the next year. What I've seen is you've taken everything and slid it out by one year. So I use the expression kicking the can, which other boards have used in the past, that we're pushing a problem out. How confident are we that moving all these projects out by a year is a prudent thing to do? And are we pushing any limitations to where we need to do something? Because the last thing I want to do is, for budget purposes, to jeopardize the replacement of a roof that may need it just because of a timeline.
Yes, in speaking with Tom and looking at these individually, we think, and we're fairly certain with confidence, that we can push these and not have it just kind of kick the can down the road, but we can still be in a good situation, so when the replacement times come, we won't be in a situation where we're having considerable leaking or anything like that. Anything that can't be dealt with. Nothing is in such a dire strait that it's an emergency situation, kind of like almost, the middle school roof when it was splitting between the seams.
So just as a follow-up, does he look at the roofs every year and decide whether a roof jumps higher priority over something else?
Yes, correct.
And therefore, this could potentially change
Yeah.
depending on situations. But
A lot of times they do, and I know it's confusing, but certain things can happen unexpectedly, and that's why things get switched around sometimes with the roof CIP. But I wouldn't have put this before you without the full confidence that Tom has in this being able to be accomplished without any incident.
okay, thank you.
Cinda?
Thanks, Matt. This is exactly what I was hoping we would be able to do, which would be, I see it less of kicking the can. If we're being prudent about, can we actually push back 1 year? And I think in the scope of a roof, a year is not a huge, when I think of kicking the can, sometimes I think of that old heat wheel from way back when that kicked we kicked the can year after year after year.
You'd
It
hurt your
just-
foot if you kicked that
Yeah,
thing, I'll
yeah,
tell you.
yeah.
It was huge,
I'm
yeah.
telling you. So I think this is exactly what I wanted to see happen. And I feel good that we feel comfortable that we can do that. And primarily, I look at it as more of a strategic focus with this, so that it really takes the burden off of the taxpayers to not have to double up for that 1 year. And it also gets us closer to when all of our bonded debt, as of this point in time, is set to come off the books. So that's a huge accomplishment for this district. It's hard to say what the future will bring, but at this point in time, this makes sense to me as far as the roofing. Secondly, as it relates to the field upgrade, I would say if you're going to move that to this upcoming year, the 1920 year, that we maybe put a double asterisk that a petition warrant article is expected. So it's not something that we've necessarily planned for as a board, but that we're trying to be prudent and on top of something that it hasn't, we don't have that yet, but it certainly, I don't think, was part of our planning to have it in this 2019-20 year. But since it looks like it's going to happen, we're able to kind of look at the big picture and see what then we recommend for the capital improvement plans. I would just notate it with a double asterisk or something and say, make that distinction. Thank you.
That's an excellent idea. What I took away from this, and you're right, I always look at the capital improvement plan, but I look at the spreadsheet that has the current bonded debt, because that truly is what you would call the controlled spike or dip in the tax rate based on the large ticket items. It's a controlled environment, but we are right now, and I would call, based on all the roofing that we've inherited from our forefathers, that we're hitting I would call a spike right now, and there is going to be a steady decline year over year. And if it comes to 24, 25, or 23, 24, where we need to do some doubling up, that it's actually not, it's still going to be a stable rate based on the existing bonded debt that we have and the bonded debt that's expiring. So with that, I feel that we're in a stronger position if we had to double up. I would say 2 years out. So that would be 22, 23. If we did have to do a double up, that 22, 23, it would not take a spike to the tax rate based on our existing bonded debt and our projected capital improvements for that year. Andy?
2 comments. First, to follow on to that. So Matt, the copy of the CIP and bonded debt schedule that you've attached to the handout doesn't reflect the changes that you've proposed. Right.
We have to make it
right, but it would be
Yeah. We
But it
will
would-
adjust that, and if you choose to make
right.
this
But,
change.
so if we do accept this tonight and vote to approve it, not only to make this change, make sure we've got it, but also make sure we post this, because I think this is a window that we've really got to make the voters aware of, because if you look at the spreadsheet and you see the total bonded debt and capital improvement number, it drops off pretty dramatically when you get a few years out as we get some of these things done, the bonded debt and the roofing projects. So some of the tax rate that we see today is due to the infrastructure things that we're doing, that we have to do to the district. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel in terms of this thing that is a significant savings to the overall budget. So I think that's important for people to understand and see that. The other comment is just to Cinda's about predictability on the roofs and kicking the can and stuff. I guess I've been doing this for a long time, and my recollection is when we first started doing the roofs, there were trade-offs that we were making because roofs were having issues. Where if we did decide to delay a roof by a year, I remember a budget committee meeting where it was pretty contentious because we decided to delay one that needed to be addressed. So I think that it's good to say that we're not kicking the can down the road as much as it is we're to the point where we have that luxury that we didn't have maybe 5-6 years ago. So
Right, where it was imminent damage versus we're being proactive in our proactive, but knowing that it will become reactive sooner than later, but not imminently. So I agree with that. And to that end, I think you want to talk about lost votes back in the day. Whenever we did make a change and the budget changed because of the capital improvement plan, I've always wanted to go back to the table, update it, and make it current to the existing conditions. I didn't win that vote back in the day, but I think that's an important touch point for our voters to have, and that we're doing so much on our website now that not having the most current and accurate CIP is not what we want. So I think we definitely are, with the adjustments we made in our budget, we'll want, even if we don't go with the one year out for everything, we want to make sure whatever we do is the most current and what they'll see presented to the planning board, because it's going to be what we're what our strategy is. So to that point, I'd like to just focus in on the roofing. Is there any other comments regarding moving every roofing project out 1 year? I know I've heard from Cinda and Andy. I'm comfortable with it as well. So I'm hoping that that will be the will of the board once we go to vote on the updated capital improvement plan. But with that, are there any other comments on what was presented? Andy?
I also just want to emphasize something that Cinda brought up about the capital improvement plan around the turf field. The double asterisk to say that it's based on a possible potential warrant article, but it's also not only about the petition warrant article, but the passage of the petition warrant article, because I think it's important for people to understand that this is sort of, it's something that we've had on our radar for a while, and that we believe, based on what we know, a petition warrant article is being proposed, that this plan would show up in this year, assuming the voters choose to pass the article this year. So I think we want to be very clear that just because the warrant article shows up doesn't mean that it's necessarily there, that there's an approval that's got to be. So.
Well, then I would have to put into account that I think, when you're talking about the drainage, that's also going up as a warrant
That's
article, so
true.
we'd have to really look at everything that way.
Well, it's Right, I mean,
Right.
I don't know if you just
No.
differentiate between a warrant article that the district's proposing versus a petition.
I wouldn't, if it's going to be a monetary cost and it's going to impact the
Fair enough.
budget, then what I would say to that is this is a plan, not, again, anything that is a plan until it becomes ratified by the voters. So,
Right, but my only comment is that having been with these guys when they went in front of the planning board, sometimes the positioning can be construed as a commitment by the district for certain prioritizations. So
Right.
we just need to make sure that they're clear about it.
right, and I would say that the Cinda's footnote makes sense, and based on the, what transpires on April 8th, if something doesn't pass, I think we should update the capital improvement plan again to reflect what the intention is for the next fiscal year going in, so it's consistently accurate to the voters to be able to reference and question. So, for true transparency. So honestly, I prefer we just had the one for the petition warrant article because it's a unique situation, but we've been doing warrant articles for capital improvements for a few years. I don't want to, I would say, change course on that. 2 cents, but will of the board is what stands. So on that, other than the note from Cinda, does anyone want to add a third note for Andy saying, district's petition warrant article? No? Okay. So with that, I guess I will entertain a motion to present the revised capital improvement plan for a final vote with the edit with Cinda's footnote. Made by Cinda, seconded by Andy. Any questions or comments to the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, none. The motion carries 5-0-0. So we have a new and improved capital improvement plan. And I got through agenda item number 4 without ever saying that student rep Chris Puzzo is excused from tonight's meeting. So early but not too late. You should put the name tag in front of me. So on that note, we are on to item number 5, which is highlighting House bills submitted to the House Education Committee to be shared with the Merrimack delegation at a subsequent board meeting. So it looks as though we have a delegation that is wanting to engage with us, and this is very exciting. I know that there's so often we've had them here once a year to talk about what happened, but not really here to talk about the impact of what their vote could be. So this is a very new and exciting way to do things. So we would love to have where agenda items make sense, or where if it makes sense to have a standing agenda item that is just basically feedback from delegation, New Hampshire delegation, which will allow us to, not only go over the bills coming up between our meetings, but then talk about where those bills could impact us. I know that there were a couple things that we're getting our legislative bulletins fast and furious now from NHSBA because we are in season. But if that's something that we'd like to do going forward, I think that it would be absolutely prudent. In our packets, we do have the 2019 New Hampshire House bill submitted to the House Education Committee. And you'll see that there are notes on the votes. Obviously, some of them have happened. But where there is feedback we want to make sure this board has, then we will just prepare going forward for bills that are imminent to be discussed. Are there any questions, comments on doing that going forward? So what we can do is a standing agenda item, if that makes sense. And absolutely, what I'll do is invite to the table our State Rep Rosemary Rung, who has provided us the initial list. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I want to just review a little bit about the process because I think it would be to the benefit of the school board to get involved earlier. For instance, I don't know if I described this to you before, but the legislative service request, which is the first step to having a bill drafted, is due the beginning of January. So if there are any things that the school board wants to see changed in state law, it would behoove you to interact with the state legislator, the legislators from Merrimack earlier than that, probably sometime in the fall, September or October. So it may be to make an annual meeting around that time, maybe even, well, it depends because with the election is in early November, but sometime by the end of November would be a good time to meet with the delegation to share what kind of changes you'd like to see. So it gives them the opportunity to meet with the Office of Legislative Services to get that drafted. And because like the bills that I shared with you last month, 20 of them are going to a vote tomorrow in executive session. And so most of the public hearings happened about the time I came to see you last time, so mid-January, end of January. And those public hearings are the optimum time for school boards to give us some guidance as to if we should support it or not support it. Because we can attend the public hearing. I know I've testified on behalf of positions the town moderator and town clerk have taken on bills. So, it's really important to have someone there speaking and providing providing written testimony. There's also opportunities at that public hearing for people to come and sign in whether they support or oppose the bill. And so even if there's no testimony given, written or oral, I got an email from the town clerk today, Diane Trippett, to make sure we lodge our opposition to a hearing tomorrow about car insurance requirements. So I'm going to go in tomorrow, I know where that meeting's going to be, that hearing, and I'm going to sign in opposition to it. If it was something I thought was really critical, or if I had more time, I may even testify on behalf of, the concerns that the town of Merrimack has. So, because once that executive session happens, and 20 of these bills in the Education Committee are going to vote, most of them, unless they decide to put it into a subcommittee, are going to go to a vote tomorrow. If they only have 2 or fewer no votes, they'll go on the consent calendar for the full House vote. And even though a member could request that it gets pulled off and have its own vote, pretty much that debate's over. So to really have influence as a school board on the legislation that's before the House, January is the magic month to get that done. So because you want to hit it at the public hearings. So that's just my advice, because that's when the delegation can have some influence. Once it comes out of executive committee, it's pretty low, because with 400 members of the House, the chance that 8 people are going to influence something very much is not. Most people just defer to the committee vote if it gets pulled off the consent calendar. Another suggestion I would make is ensure you include Senator Shannon Chandley in the delegation, because I know she's very active and she's very much wants to support the interests of Merrimack. And there are a lot of education bills going through the Senate committees. Now we'll get those probably in March. It depends if they have to go to Finance and Ways and Means. And then the other thing, what you mentioned, Chairman Barnes, is having a standing agenda item, which I think is a great idea. The town council has that, and we try to make sure there's at least one legislator at each meeting. And last meeting, I had a lot of bills to report on that was of interest to the town council, so it gave me the opportunity to speak to that and get their feedback, or them to give me feedback. And I know other legislators did the same thing. So it may be just something like public participation, but legislator participation or something. And if legislators are there, we can speak. If not, move on. But if there is something you want to share with the legislators, I'll make sure I'm at that meeting. So those are just my 2 cents. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Do you have any questions?
Are there any questions of our state rep? So Cinda.
Not so much a question, but I did want to say thank you. Thank you for bringing this to us. I really appreciate the partnership and the way I feel we can work as delegation on the town together and through collaboration and communication. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And I know today there is a Democratic caucus to set priorities as we enter in full House votes. And I was really pleased to see a lot of support given for healthcare cost containment and access, and also education funding, because I think that will have the biggest impact on our property tax rate. And, you know, when property taxes go down, people are more apt to support things. You know, they don't feel like, yikes, I don't know if I can take anymore. So I think, you know, those are really good signs. And those are things that it would be great to have the opportunity to share where the momentum is in Concord. You know, where do we see things really happening and changing? I know Family and Medical Leave Act is a big thing, but I know with the, you know, just people don't have access to a lot of media, like print media that they used to have, and mass media tends not to be gets into the weeds as much. Excuse me. So, you know, being able to have the opportunity to really kind of give you the backstory on some of these bills and where House leadership or just the majority is going, it would be great to give you that heads up and also get your feedback for it. Great. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate it. We look forward to further visits. And Marge wanted to also
Yeah, I was just
pipe
going
in.
to ask Rosemary before she leaves. Do you know the status of House Bill 447, which has to do with the school calendar days and when school is to start?
Yeah, this public hearing was on January 23rd, but they haven't scheduled the executive session yet.
So it's still yet to come.
So it's still yet to come, but at the executive session, there's no public input. So the public hearing is where the committee takes in all of the opinions and information, not just from the Department of Education, you know, lobbying organizations, school boards association, anyone can go to a public hearing. Other state reps can sign in whether they support it or oppose it. But it's probably still worth it to, if it's a priority of the school board, is to send a letter in. The earliest they would have that executive session would be next week. We get this calendar on Thursday. They can't schedule the executive session on that will probably be next week if I had to take a guess. But it's, you know, it's still worthwhile to provide input. I can do that for you. It's very easy to do it by email online now. If there's they put in a link where it says committee members, that if you click that, it automatically sends whatever your message to everybody on that committee. So it makes it pretty easy. Although, I mean, people get swamped in emails, but I think they would pay attention to something coming from the Merrimack School Board.
Okay.
Yeah, I just raised it up because this board, you've been so active in asking your constituents about their thoughts about the school calendar, that we're just so committed to local control and letting, you know, families speak about what's important to them. So I thought that was one that, because of the action you've taken, we could speak of tonight.
Yeah, so yeah, that they already had the hearing on that, but they haven't had the executive count. And my big priority is also local control. I support a lot of enabling legislation to give local communities the opportunity to make that decision that's going to affect them. So, okay, well, thank you very much.
Thanks again. We are on to item number 6, which is activities in response to the new 2017 Youth Risk Behavior Survey. So I'm going to turn it over to Mark, who I believe is going to turn it over to the PowerPoint. We have copies at our place as well. And we have already reviewed the data of the 2017 Youth Risk Behavior Survey at a prior meeting. So now we're just looking at, based on that data, what has the board done and what is the board still strategizing going forward. So hopefully I stalled well enough for Mark to take it over.
Perfect. Well
Excellent.
done. Thank you. So I appreciate the opportunity to provide the board and the community with updates relative to school district activities and activities of Merrimack Safeguard in response to the 2017 Youth Risk Behavior Survey. Just as a quick background for those who might know, the Youth Risk Behavior Survey is an instrument supported by the Centers for Disease Control, and it seeks to gain information from students about their behavior around a variety of categories involving substance use and abuse, suicide ideation and other things. And it is important for communities to receive this data so that to the extent that any part of it is actionable, we would have the data to take some action about it. So I just would provide just a brief refresher to the board and the community about the 2017 YRBS results. They're surveys that are produced every 2 years. So we are soon to establish our 2019 survey and then hopefully in the fall of this year receive those results. But these are based on 2017, which we're still working on. So when we shared with you the data, we provided you with sort of a 10-year snapshot of some improvements that we had seen. Just to remind you, ninth grade graders reported their first alcohol use before age 13. We saw a marked improvement in, or decrease in the number of students who did that. Decrease in 30-day alcohol use for all grades combined. We saw an improvement in students reporting that they had ridden in a vehicle driven by someone who had been drinking. And we saw a decrease in students self-reporting 30-day prescription drug use by grade. We also saw some areas of concern, and I'll describe to you the colored lettering in a minute. But areas of concern in the 10 years from 2007 to the 2017 YRBS results were an increase in students given alcohol by others. And what we have found off of that, quite a bit through some of the work of Merrimack Safeguard, is just a misunderstanding that some people have about their responsibility. So some people might be of the impression that in order to keep students off the road from drinking, that perhaps they might provide students with young people in the community with an opportunity to have a safe house for drinking. But actually, that really is not a good interpretation of that, because providing alcohol to students or young people to keep them off the road, while a good theoretical premise, still means that some students shouldn't be, young people, keep saying that students, some young people shouldn't be exposed to alcohol given the age requirements in our state. We also saw an increase in 30-day marijuana use by grade in that 10-year period. Students reporting driving while drinking. We saw an increase in suicide and depression rates in those 10 years. And also an increase in the use of electronic vapor products. And that data has changed significantly in the last year. So when my anticipation is that when we conduct the 2019 Youth Risk Behavior Survey, we will see a skyrocket in that number. So it's to say that the use of electronic vapor products, everything from nicotine to THC, has literally exploded in the last year. And so the numbers in the 2017 YRBS really aren't even accurate anymore. But nevertheless, what they have done is provided a guide for our school district and our community group, Merrimack Safeguard, to try to engage in proactive activities that would seek to address those findings. So I just will point out in a minute, you will see that when I point out activities that Merrimack District and Merrimack Safeguard have been involved in, I am highlighting those areas in areas of concern, A, B, C, D, and E, that are specifically related to activities we've undertaken, so that you try to see a correlation between data that we have and actions that we've taken. So I'll show you that in a minute, but just we'll refer to those colored sections, those colored letters in a minute. One of the things that we know is that the job of educating our youth about anything is a very challenging job. And it really is best done when we can work really in partnership with our community. And so one of the goals of our activities around responding to the YRBS data is to use that data to inform decisions that help us to, determine the best use of our time, the best use of our financial and human resources. Merrimack Safeguard's vision is to support community and youth to make positive choices, and we want to be sure that we can be as targeted in that effort as we can be. And so our goal is to use that data to inform those decisions. We also want to connect that YRBS data and other data sources that come from state and federal to specific actions in response to that data. So again, I'm just driving home the point that we are making an effort at the district and at the community level, most notably through Merrimack Safeguard, to be specific and targeted in our activities, because we don't have unlimited resources. And then finally, to connect with community partners wherever possible to address areas of common concern. And one of the things that we've really been trying to highlight over the last many years is that the schools are a part of a larger community. And so in order to address concerns around mental health or substance use or abuse, it's really a bigger issue than just trying to create or implement policies at the school level. It really involves working with community partners, parents, business owners, and others to combine efforts to really view this as a holistic concern that we all should share. And so that has been one of our real concerted goals over the last number of years, directly in response to many data points we have, and specifically YRBS. So activities conducted so far, and again, so far meaning the YRBS survey is typically conducted in April of the year. So this would have been in April of 2017. We get results in the fall of 2017. And so we've had from the fall of 2017 to the present day to try to respond, to analyze and try to respond. And so one of the things that the board and the community has heard so much about are efforts of the Merrimack School District Mental Health Committee. That's ongoing. There is no particular time frame for that. And I cite A through E back on a slide a couple of slides ago. So you see right there, students given alcohol by others, so on and so forth, right down to E, increase in use of electronic vapor products. The District Mental Health Committee is committed to trying to more fully understand the relationship between social and emotional challenges that students have and tendencies to engage in destructive behaviors. We don't mean to suggest that there is a one-to-one correlation, but there is a lot of evidence to suggest that there are relationships between a student's mental health and a generalized likelihood to engage in activities that could be harmful relative to substances or other kinds of bad negative ideation. And so there has been a lot of work in our district, but I would also point out across the state around issues of mental health. In fact, our own State Department of Education's Office of Student Wellness has made great strides in continuing to investigate and work on this issue. And the governor very recently has gone on record as talking about his support for conversations and specific work around suicide prevention. And so we are gratified to hear that, because those of us who are sort of quote unquote in the trenches in the schools and in the classrooms know what it is we're seeing and know that our job is to provide an education for students, but first have to make sure that they're ready to learn. And if they are overwhelmed by particular challenges, then that makes our job, our mission of education, that much more challenging. So we see a link between trying to attend to that and to try to therefore get students ready to learn. We've held, as the board and the community, I'm sure remembers, we've held a number of community events. I didn't list all of them because some of them happened prior to the 2017 YRBS results. We had a concert by the artist Nicole Michelle several years ago. That was prior to these results. We had a community forum in the spring of 2017 prior to these results being released. But last April 3rd, we had a Building Community Connections event, putting the pieces together. That was held at the O'Leary Center. It was well attended, and the idea of that was, again, to try to introduce members of the community to local and regional partners who can be friends of the community to support students to make healthy choices. And so there were a variety of health organizations, faith groups, present businesses who are all in support of our initiatives. And the idea was to make connections, to help people understand that they're not alone, and that if there is a particular challenge that they or someone in their family is having, that there are resources that they might not previously have known that they can actually avail themselves of to help put the pieces together for themselves. Also, last year, at that same event, we introduced the Be Responsible Merrimack campaign that, again, relates to all the colored areas of concern from the 2017 YRBS, and specifically the AOK campaign. You might remember that student Sarah Heimberg presented a video that showed district leaders, community leaders rather, not just district leaders, community leaders, from the superintendent to police chief to faith leaders and others to talk about what their role is in taking responsibility for their own growth, and most importantly, for what it means to ask for help. And so AOK means ask for help, offer help, and keep it going. That was an initiative of Merrimack Safeguard. So you see that we're trying to show a relationship between school district initiatives around these issues and community. And the Merrimack Safeguard is a community group that has been in existence for about 10 years now. And that AOK campaign was designed to demonstrate to the community that at any point along a person's life, there are times when we all need help. And that to be afraid to ask for help for fear that it will show a weakness is not a good way to approach challenges that they have. And that sometimes when we're feeling okay, there might be someone else who isn't. And so at those times, it's okay to offer help. And sometimes that's not taken, but almost all the time, the offer of help is appreciated. And then when that person is feeling prepared to take the help, they know that it has been offered. And then the idea of keep it going is, how do we sustain this? One of the primary missions of Merrimack Safeguard over 10 years has been to try to build community sustainability and to keep these ideas going, because A through E are community concerns, not just school district concerns, but community concerns. We've also held a Dangers of Vaping presentation and panel discussion on November 14th, 2018. That specifically relates to E, increase in use of electronic vapor products. Because of the explosion of the use of that, I'm sure that we will work to have similar programs in the future. That was the initiative of a member of Merrimack Safeguard, Matthew GM Bartolome, who is a senior at Merrimack High School and just an outstanding example of youth getting involved and making a real difference. And he put on a fabulous presentation. He got the panel and the keynote person all on his own, and Merrimack Safeguard just kind of supported him. That was well attended, and that was directly related to the 2017 YRBS. We have some proposed activities that I'd like to just share with you tonight. Of course, the continued work of the District Mental Health Committee. I think so much has been said about that, and more will be said, but their work is very important to achieving some of our goals for making students ready to learn. One of the things that we're very committed to doing is to hosting Hidden in Plain Sight. For those of you who might not know it, it's a organization that supports community awareness about the ways in which some common products, particularly around vaping or inhalants and other substances, can be easily hidden in common areas in a home or in a school. And the idea is that after the presentation, knowledge is power, and families can be more aware of the things to look for, both in youth behavior, but also in literally the things about a house, to provide better understanding about how it could be that a child might be, a student, young youth might be engaged in some activities and folks might not know. That not knowing is a concern. And so this has been a program that's been very, very highly regarded in many places around the country, and we're in active talks to bring that group into our community in the spring of 2019. And I will say, when I say we, I'm referring to, in this case, Merrimack Safeguard. And again, I would just point you in the direction of B&E, 30-day marijuana use by grade, an increase in use of electronic vapor products. Bringing in Hidden in Plain Sight is a direct response to that. Chaos and Kindness, also known as Recycled Percussion, our hope is that we are able to bring that group into our community in the spring and summer of 2019, and that relates to students given alcohol by others, an increase in use of electronic vapor products, and really we could have had a number of other items there as well. What Chaos and Kindness and Recycled Percussion really is about is a very positive, proactive, very contemporary, fun way to engage families, not just youth alone, but families in concert together, and the community through music and dance. But the message is really clear that substances are not helpful, and they can in fact be hurtful, and the choices that one makes hurt both oneself and one's family, and even sometimes one's community. And so it's a very positive story that they have to share. And so we're working very actively, again, Merrimack Safeguard, to try to bring that group into, Merrimack in the spring or summer of 2019. Breathe New Hampshire is an initiative of the state that focuses directly on the impact of students bodies when they ingest smoke of various kinds, from straight nicotine to marijuana cigarettes to vaping products of a variety of sorts. One thing that we learned in our vaping presentation in November is that the particulates that are included in vaping are minuscule, and as such can lodge into the spongy areas of the lungs in ways that are very damaging as one ages. But one might think because they're vaporized that they would just kind of pass through permeably, but they really don't. And one of the things that we've learned is that those substances lodge and find a home in the lungs, and with excessive use or just the damage that they provide or offer to a lung, even if there isn't a lot of use, just do their own damage just in and of themselves. So this is all in the spirit of education, not to scare, but rather to just provide information so that people can make their own decisions. And then also there's been considerable talk about providing featured speaker presentations in the spring and summer. And I'll speak to you why we talk about spring and summer and not go past fall in a minute. One of the featured speaker presentations suggested was the relationship between social emotional challenges and opioid abuse. Again, the tendency for some people, not all people, we're not generalizing, but the tendency for some to go to seek supports in opioid use and other kinds of substances are in some relationship to social emotional challenges that people encounter that perhaps they don't have really keen ways of working through. And so a featured speaker presentation around that, and also conversations around early childhood development and relationship to brain development. The idea that early trauma is a real signal of potential brain delay as students, as young people mature. And so information about that relationship, we think, again, Merrimack Safeguard thinks is very, very helpful. That's also somewhat part of the work, just a minor part, but an important part of the work of the District Mental Health Committee as well. Want to just say a word about Merrimack Safeguard. For those of you who have heard of Merrimack Safeguard but aren't entirely sure what it is or who we are, it is a group that formed in the wake of our receiving a substantial, and by that I mean over $1 million grant about 10 years ago. The chief function of that grant was to support an SRO at Merrimack Middle School. We're very grateful to the town for supporting the sustaining of that position after the grant funding goes away. And that will go away on September 30 of 2019. And so all of the activities that I've just described will be paid for in large part by remaining funds from Merrimack Safeguard. Those funds must be expended, and not just encumbered, but expended by September 30, 2019. So when I indicate certain activities by spring, summer 2019, it's because we can't go past September 30th. And so we're really trying to conclude Merrimack Safeguard's current incarnation in a positive way by providing a number of opportunities for the community to learn and engage. The next phase of Merrimack Safeguard is under discussion. We have always really welcomed community partners, folks in the community. This is this issue of helping students make healthy choices and positive choices. This issue of providing a safe environment in our schools has always been bigger than just one group to handle. It should not just be the purview of the school board. It should not just be the purview of district administration or building administration, any more than it should just be the purview of the police or just the purview of mental health or faith people. It should really be a concerted effort of all the community. And so the current iteration of Merrimack Safeguard will probably substantially change as this grant goes away. And we're looking, though, for different incarnations of Merrimack Safeguard moving forward, including perhaps adopting other strategies and other styles. But I will say, as I often do when I get to talk about this, that we meet at St. James Church the first Thursday of each month at 6 p.m., and we really, really welcome all community members who want to join our small but very, very committed group of people who have been really taking an active effort for many, many years. In some cases, we've had members who have retained for 10 years, and we're so grateful to them. And an argument could be made that we need to broaden that, and that more people who are concerned about these issues take ownership in helping to support them. And so we welcome all comers. You don't have to call ahead or tell anybody, just show up and be part of the conversation about what happens next. So I conclude by just sharing that we have really tried to take the YRBS results that we have had over that number of years and really try to be very surgical about how we interpret that data and then connect them to activities that we're supporting so that we can make some difference for the youth in our community. So I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
I see Andy's hand and take other comments.
Well, it's not really a question for you, but except to say thank you for bringing this forward. as you know, I've been on Safeguard for, I think, 5 years now as a liaison in. As you mentioned, the purpose of Safeguard was driven by the grant that we received to fund the student resource officer at the middle school. But also our actions as a Safeguard was to look at risk behaviors around youth and be able to work with the community to be able to address those. So we did things around raising awareness around alcohol sales and local things, to make sure that they, businesses were aware. We worked a lot with the police department around drug take back. I don't know how we influence the unit that's at the police station all the time, but we were certainly involved as part of that effort around drug take back. But largely the involvement has been school-led, police department-led, a little bit from the community. I think there's a real opportunity with a lot of the opioid issues that are around now, the vaping issues that are here. This is really a group of people that are dedicated to try to not necessarily solve problems, but raise awareness and help educate. And as you've mentioned, we haven't had a lot of success in getting people from different areas of the community involved in Safeguard. And as its former model winds down where the grant isn't really there anymore, I think there's a real opportunity and momentum that we can pick up moving for parents and adults and kids in the community that are seeing impacts of the opioid crisis, that are seeing impacts around vaping and other things like that. This is a place where there are people that want to help, want to organize, want to help raise awareness and come up with ideas to address it. So I really would encourage anybody that has any questions or concerns or thoughts or says, what difference can I make around things that are going on in town? You hear of overdoses and things that nobody wants to hear. What can I do? Raising awareness, especially at the youth level, is a huge opportunity. So I know that I, for one, not only as a school board member being a liaison, but also as a resident, want to stay involved in that even after the funding goes away to help do this. I mean, I don't have kids anymore that are in high school at all in the high school level. They're older, but I see the effects that it could have, and I want to stay involved. So I encourage others to want to be involved and stay involved as it goes forward.
Anyone? Brandy.
Thank you so much. I want to second everything that Andy had said, and in addition, I'd like to ask if there's a way that we can post that, perhaps on our Merrimack Facebook page, to continue to communicate about everything that has been done thus far, as well as sort of an invitation via Facebook for those that don't necessarily tune in to view on Merrimack TV our school board meetings. I think it is something that would really be, it would be great to see the community come out and join on Thursdays. And I think the more people know about it, know about the funding, ending, know about what Project Safeguard intends to do in the future, I think we can rally sort of more parents to get involved. And I would just encourage over communication surrounding this, but definitely on the Merrimack Facebook page or school district Facebook page, I think would be terrific to see it posted there as well.
So just a real quick comment. There is a Facebook page for Safeguard. That what we could do is link the pages together, do a share or whatever, because I think as we're raising awareness for the Merrimack School District Facebook page, raising awareness for the Safeguard Facebook page and the website and stuff would be good. So,
Cinda, the other liaison to Merrimack Safeguard.
Along the same lines, maybe asking people to like the page so that they can start to get information directly from the Safeguard page as well. Sometimes it's just good to put that, I guess you'd call it like a tickler, to say, like the page if you're interested in finding out more information.
So I would just wrap by saying that this is a difficult topic to address, but I think the one thing that this district has always been, and this committee has always been, Merrimack Safeguard, is brave. I think it's a brave thing to talk about a topic no one wants to think about, thinking it may not be their own kid. So, but just to put a face to it that it's our community. You know, just as we did with our homeless students when we did get that donation. There's so many things that people don't want to think about that public education has to face outside of reading and writing and arithmetic, and all the work that goes into making those resources available. And of course, this is a community-wide committee, community-wide resources with the grant that will, even if your child is homeschooled, private schooled, charter schooled, that all are welcome to take in this knowledge and just to get a better idea of what's around you, because it's in Merrimack. May not be necessarily in the kid sitting next to you in your math class, but it's in our town. So having the opportunity to be able to bring these items to light, it's brave that we can do this. And it takes a lot of, it's a tough topic to tackle. So congratulations to you. The committee was done a decade of wonderful work. I did spend 3 years there myself as liaison, so I see the passion in the room and the desire to make change for all of Merrimack. So keep up the good work and post grant, but I think that there's still a conversation that can be carried with this committee and with these presentations and the YRBS. I'm very much looking forward to 19's study, because you're right. I think vaping was something we heard about, and now it's something we see popping up on every street corner as a like a shop. So it's absolutely tangible and relevant. So how are we addressing it with our youth? So I'm very interested to see how that goes, and we look forward to that in a few months. Thank you. We're on to the housekeeping portion of our show. So we will get to item number 7, which is approval of January 14th, 2019 and January 22nd, 2019 minutes. We'll take them one at a time. The lights are back. Wow. So the first is our school board budget meeting, which was January 14th, which was Monday. I will entertain a motion to accept. Made by Andy, seconded by Naomi. Are there any edits to this set of minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, none. The motion carries 5-0-0. On to January 22nd, 2019. That was a regular school board meeting, which was held on a Tuesday because of the holiday having the district closed. So is there a motion to accept? Made by Cindy, seconded by Brandy. Are there any edits to the January 22nd minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, none. The motion carries 5-0-0. Item number 8 is the acceptance of gift and grant under $5,000. And I turn it over to Matt.
Thank you very much. This evening, we have a gift to Thornton's Ferry Elementary School from Fidelity Education Matching Gifts in the amount of $2,000. It's a result of a $1,000 contribution to Thornton's Ferry from the Trudeau family, and it is to be used for educational purposes at the discretion of school administration. We thank the Trudeau family and Fidelity Education Matching Gifts Foundation.
I'll entertain a motion. Cinda?
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the $2,000 gift from the Trudeau family. Trudeau, thank you. With our gratitude.
Seconded by Andy. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, none. The motion carries 5-0-0. On to item number 9, which is consent with Mark.
So on consent tonight, we have the following administrator resignation. Rachel Schneider, assistant principal at Reed's Ferry Elementary School.
I'll entertain a motion. Andy?
I move we, with unfortunate regret, but accept the resignation of Assistant Principal Rachel Schneider.
Seconded by Naomi. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, none. Motion carries 5-0-0. Item number 10 is other. Any correspondence to come before the board? Cinda?
I received correspondence from a parent that will have a child in the upcoming kindergarten class, specifically regarding our lice policy in the district. So I reached out to administration. I was able to get the policy that we have and provide it to that parent. And I requested, I offered to help facilitate if she wanted to have any further conversations with the elementary school principal at which her child would be attending.
Any other correspondence? I received correspondence from a parent of an incoming kindergartner for Thornton's Ferry asking if they had an open house. So I sent it over to administration, which was, and they were reached out to and addressed. I received a second email or call from a parent, and that was just regarding a question on communication, and a message was left. So that's all I have. If there are no others, I will go on to comments. Are there any comments from the board? Seeing none, item number 11, new business. Is there any new business to come before the board? Seeing none, item number 12, committee reports. Are there any committee reports from the board? Naomi?
I have two, which I believe is a record for me. The first one, the NHSBA delegate convention. Do we call it a convention?
Delegate Assembly.
Yes, happened and was interesting to attend, as always. One of the things that was most interesting for me this time is there was a great deal of discussion on the floor of one thing or another. There were amendments proposed. There were pieces that went back and forth. There were new proposals brought forward at the time. I think that we may want to reconsider at some point how we handle this as a board, because I was locked into a single position regardless of the conversation that took place. And I also felt that given the mandate or the position I've been given by the board, I didn't take positions on new proposals that were brought forward. And so that might be a conversation to have over the coming year. The second piece is the Budget Committee, which has met and will meet again tomorrow night. And the conversations have been relatively standard and interesting. The only thing that came forward that I couldn't answer as well as I'd like to had to do with the $30,000+ for transportation and where that came from and how it's going to affect services as far as transportation for sports. I think Matt waded in and gave a good answer. I think we covered it, but I think there's some concern that it means that we're dropping transportation, and we tried to reassure that that's not the case.
Correct.
Oh, with the ones that are in Merrimack and can use the regular school bus routes to, okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Context. Okay, good. Are there any other committee reports? Seeing none, I'm going to just add to your NHSBA Delegate Assembly comment. It's definitely a standard practice that they want the will of the board to be resonated. I think that, flexibility being given to the delegate is not a bad thing. Some districts do, some districts don't. I think the will of the board is, and if you feel it's comfortable, I think that you're representing the board amicably, and I think that that would be something I would absolutely support going forward. So you can kind of, go with the flow. There are those who don't have, they just send the delegates and that's it. And for those, they just have free reign to really look at their own position on things. We've, in the last few years, have had the board's position on things, and obviously as the context of the motions change, and they changed a lot, probably more than I've ever seen in my time up there, and running the meeting was even more entertaining for myself. But it was probably the most aggressive discussion that I've ever seen up there. So giving you that flexibility based on what we've seen this year, I definitely see that we should probably, take a look at how we look at doing things up there, so you can be fully engaged in really knowing the overall will of the board, but not where each vote is kind of mandated to you. So I agree with that. The other thing that happened at the NHSBA, which I did want to report on, is we had the benefit of having our mental health committee co-chairs Julie DeLuca and John Fabrizio present on all the work that the mental health committee is doing in our district, the history of how that work came to be, what it is and what it isn't, which is so important. I think we're not here to diagnose and treat kids, but we're here to create a productive and welcoming learning environment for those who need those skills. But we're definitely not here to be a mental health facility. So that was absolutely driven in, and then the resources and the funding that they've procured. I think what's so difficult with some of these issues that we tackle is how do you fund the problem? Because there are definitely resources that are needed because they're not in the wheelhouse of what you learn when you're becoming a teacher or even administrator necessarily. So the work that they're doing and how other districts can look to tackle those same issues going forward, there was a lot of questions on that. So, and we thank them so much for taking the time out of their Saturday morning to spend with the NHSBA Delegate Assembly. There were about 65 people there that got to take in their testimony, and that was I mean, very proud of us at the Merrimack School District, but so important that they got that information as well. So I'm glad we could be the neighbor that could deliver it. So that's my 2 cents on that. So I have no other committee reports. So I will go on to public comments on agenda items. So anyone that would like to speak on what we discussed tonight, please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record.
Rosemary Rung, 21 Ministerial Drive.
Thanks, Rosemary.
And just to give you a preview of building a relationship with the state legislators, as there were some items discussed tonight that could really be facilitated through this, because there were 3 bills that have already gone through public hearing. One is to set up a commission to study the impact of the opioid epidemic. And also vaping, there's a bill there that, you know, we could definitely advocate for, that builds in more stringent requirements regarding vaping and e-liquids and THC vaporizers on school district property. And then the other one is on mental health. I know there was a hearing last week that would mandate teachers receive, I think, 2 hours a year training in suicide identification and mental health, just so they could see some of the signs and symptoms. So those are some things we could bring to you well ahead of time, especially if we know that it's a priority of the school district. And then Breathe New Hampshire, by the way, is actually, it's not a function of the state. It's a private nonprofit. It's would be comparable to a state chapter of the New Hampshire Lung Association. And I know they do a lot of education around the state on vaping and the dangers of vaping. And then the other thing when we're talking about during the discussion regarding Merrimack Safeguard is maybe consider leveraging some of the resources regionally. I know Mayor Donchis has a task force on the opioid crisis, and he had a meeting last week where he invited all of the legislators, town government. I don't know if the school district received an invitation. I know Bill Boyd was there for the town council, but they had a lot of people, and there was a panel discussion about all the different areas of it. And I went really just to learn and to meet people that are involved in it, and I was just blown away. It was such a great meeting. It was so educational. They talked a lot about adverse childhood events and had a lot of research regarding how children that are exposed to that experience 4 or more of those, they had data that showed the increase in substance abuse. And it was great. It was a great, Janet Valuc was there. She's an old friend of mine from years and years ago. She was a longtime educator in Nashua. And so she is on that task force representing one organization, and they had the director of the Nashua Mental Health Center. I think that's the name of it, but she was great. I mean, it was a great opportunity, and I'm glad that they recognized this, you know, and approached it from a regional perspective. So I think if we can engage more on that, there's some resources we could probably take advantage of. And that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak under public comments?
Richard Foote, 129 Indian Rock Road. You mentioned that House Bill was 774, or whatever that was, or something like that. Well, I was curious, is that something to do with the length of the school year? I don't know what it is. I'm just curious.
It has to do with whether school starts before Labor Day or after Labor Day.
Yeah. Is that important?
It's important to us because we survey the parents of Merrimack to ask them what they would prefer. So rather than have the state mandate that we're going to start after Labor Day, it gives us an opportunity to find out from our parents what they prefer.
Yeah. Okay, good enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Foote. Seeing that we have run out of public, we will close public comments on agenda items. Take a moment to sign the manifest, and I will entertain a motion to go to non-public session per RSA 91-A:3, Roman numeral 2, Section C. Made by Andy, seconded by Cinda. Brandy, how do you vote?
In favor?
Naomi?
In favor?
Cinda?
In favor.
Andy?
In favor?
And I vote in favor. The motion carries 500. Thank you and good night.